Welcome to Optimal Game State. In this third and final video in the series, we're going to look at character generation for the current edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay by Cubicle 7. Then I can get back to looking at some more games. One of the great things about the WFRP is the series of random tables you can use to generate a completely random character. That said, as part of the process, there are some decisions to make, and if you went in completely blind, you're likely to make a character that looks fun to play, but never quite works, as the idea is a little bit let down by the mechanics of the system. So in this video, my goal is to give you the info you need to make some informed decisions. Now, the idea here isn't to make a super optimized character. I'm never going to tell you not to take the beggar career, for example. But we are going to make sure you know where to find the key skill for that career, in that case, charm, for begging, and how you would best be able to use it. The book does give a good overview of the process, and it brings you through each step. So we start by rolling for your species, then for your career. The 10 attributes get rolled, each individually, and after that we get into selections of skills and talents available for your career. And there are a few other options to select after that. At each of the stages, if you select a completely random option, you get some bonus XP to spend later. But if you aren't happy, you usually can roll again or just pick, but then you lose out on some of that bonus XP. I should say that I'm at least a week late on this video, maybe more, as my group has already gone through character generation. Now that's good for you guys, as it means I learned a few lessons while going through that process, and hopefully that'll help with this video. It was also interesting to watch how the different people in our group approached the task with slightly different mindsets. Our first player rolling up a character went completely random. The species was human, the career spy, and characteristics taken as roles without, I believe, any switching. There were a few decisions that had to be made, but apart from that, this player was happy just to let the dice decide, and he ended up with a pretty fun-looking character. Our second player rolled up a human seaman, which got a few chuckles because we're all basically overgrown children. Characteristics were shuffled to focus character, and he started working out a backstory around how this character might have been descended from noble blood and was waiting for his moment. So this is a great example of letting the initial roles get you a bit of flavor, but not necessarily defining character. So he might be a seaman now, but someday he might be a baron. Our next player ended up with a human townswoman, which left her struggling to get a grip on what the character should be. Now, you definitely could make a great character starting with this career, but it is pretty tricky to spark ideas if you don't already know what you want to play. So we let her think about this for a while and we skipped ahead to the next player. Our next player, she rolled a human wizard, and her GM silently resigned himself to having to read the spellcasting rules after all. We pulled out the Winds of Magic book and spent some time talking our way through the various colleges until the player was happy to decide to go with the Spiritor of the Amethyst Order. She then got stuck into working out what skills were needed and how to actually get a spell off. So if you do end up with a spellcaster character like this, you are going to have to do a little bit more research to find out exactly what's needed and how the various spells work. I'm not going to cover it in this video, but you want to focus on certain skills, and it should make sense. But going back to our townswoman, she decided to take the XP hit and got 2 more rolls, and out of those, one of them was the outlaw career, which sparked some ideas for her. We also realized at this point that her rolls for her characteristics totaled up to 99. So it was recommended she instead go for the points buy, which basically gives you 100 characteristic points assigned as you desired. But you do lose out on a 25 XP. Ironically, that is enough for exactly 1 advance in a characteristic. Going by the points buy would at least let her focus her character's numbers where she wants them. So, that was, in this case, that was definitely the best option to go with. When it came to me, I rolled on species and was happy with human. I rolled on the career, didn't like it, rolled 2 more times, and pretty much ignored them, as my heart was set on playing a few different options. One of them was Witch Hunter, which I picked here. So I had shortlisted careers previously going into this that I thought would be fun to play. And obviously, if I rolled into them, I was going to keep it and try to get the bonus XP. But if I didn't roll into them, like I did here, I was just going to pick whichever I felt was most appropriate. And in this case, I had asked to be the last player to roll because I wanted to see what the rest of the party had, just so I could kind of round out what they had. One of my considerations was a Priest of More. I'd also thought about a Grey Wizard or a Prometheus Wizard, but that had already been covered. The Warrior Priest was another fun sounding option, but the party definitely seems a little morally grey for a Warrior Priest. So I went with Witch Hunter, which was probably top of my list anyway, but it felt like it was a really good fit with the group. And if needed, I can give a bit of a push for adventure. Now, the idea of having a witch hunter and a wizard in the party could be something that some players will, generate some tension or conflict between. We just settled that, we're old friends and that there's no concerns of witchcraft whatsoever. So I'm going to be happily rocking it with this Prometheus wizard. Obviously, down the lines that she decides to go into some chaos magic or raising the dead, then there will be questions asked. But right now and for the foreseeable future, I completely trust her. So stuff like that is just to kind of smooth the game out. We don't need to have tension unless it's going to be adding to the experience, adding to the game. And in this case, we just want to play it through. When it came to characteristics, I just rolled the hell out of it. I got a total of 137 out of the potential 200 points that you can roll. So 2d10, you're rolling 10 times. Now, while I probably could have gotten away with leaving the number to where they landed, instead I took an XP hit to shuffle them around a bit. So that meant I've got 45 XP at the end to play with, but I was very, very happy with the character I had. So we had lots of different approaches there and lots of different characters. We did spend a full session rolling up our characters and working out some sort of group backstory, which ended up suspiciously like a CW teen series. After that, we had the week, and our GM let us go back over our characters and make some tweaks on the decisions that we'd got. So everything we'd kind of rolled up was out of the way, and it was just making sure that those, picking out the right talents and the right combination of skills and characteristics and so on. Now, there is nothing wrong with just going with your gut and plugging those numbers in, but for me, I think it's kind of nice if you've got an idea of what your character should be like to have those stats, those mechanics to try and back it up. And also, as we'll see as I talk about later, I also want to kind of think about the long term and where this character is going and where I can kind of save some XP to make sure they're going to be a little bit better further down the line. All right, so let's go through some of the options and numbers and see how we can make that character we want to play. The first thing we need to decide on is what species you are. You get to roll on the chart on page 24 of the core rulebook, and 90% of the time you're going to be human. Now, there are a few variants of this table. Archives of the Empire 2 squeezes in a 1% chance of an ogre. Rough Nights and Hard Days does the same with gnomes. There isn't a combined table, but in theory, you could just adjust a normal table, taking a percentage point off of humans each time. So you could make maybe 89 for gnomes and 90 for ogres, if that was something you want to include. If you like the roll you get 20 XP. If you don't like the roll, you just pick the species you want. So we have two questions straight up here. First off, how are the various races compared? Because they aren't balanced, they aren't fair. And second, how much XP is 20? So we're going to start with the XP first. Typically at the end of each session, you're going to get 100 XP. So 20 really isn't that much. XP is used to increase your characteristics and skills as well as gain extra talents. A new talent is going to cost you 100 XP, but will get more expensive if you take the same talent multiple times. A lot of times you're just going to take talent once, but there are ones where you can get multiple advances of it. Advancing your characteristics and skills start cheap, but scale up depending on the number of advantages you already have. So each percentage point of a characteristic from 0 to 5 will cost 25 points. So that's the characteristics and attributes. They seem to switch between them, but characteristics. So each percentage point of a characteristic from 0 to 5 costs 25, and for a skill, that's only going to cost 10. If we make the jump to illustrate from 21 to 25, that's 70 XP per point for characteristic and 40 XP per point for skills. So things will get expensive fast. Initially, though, that 20 XP is about 2% in a skill, so it's really not that much at all. Now, each species has a different set of starting skills and talents that they can pick from during character generation. Most of these are flavor, and for humans, there are a chunk of randomly rolled ones. There are a couple of variants of these across the various spot books, so there are different humans. So the default one is the Reichlanders, but there's, in the Middenheim book, you've got Middenlanders. A few of the different dwarfs have options, and halflings have options in various books. They're very, very similar. Unless there's something of particular interest to you out there, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But yeah, it's kind of good to know they're there. For the species skills, later in the process, you are going to pick 3 of them and give them 5 advances each. So that's 5% each. Then you're going to pick another 3 and give each of them 3 advances. So 3% each. They're all going to be different. And as you can see here, you've got a bunch of skills and talents. And you are going to get all of the talents that are listed there. So for humans, which majority of people will be, you're going to get doomed, you're going to get 3 random talents, and then you have a choice between savvy or suave. Savvy is basically +5 to your intellect before advances, so it's not going to rack up the points cost, which is really good. And suave is the same but for fellowship. And as you can see, like, there's lots of them across this. Notably, a lot of the other races do actually get a night vision, whereas the humans don't. Not really that relevant. You're probably going to have a group with like 90%. Obviously, the majority of randomly ones are going to be humans. Okay, so this kind of illustrates the different initial talents and the different skills that you can have. For the species skills later in the process, right. Then where there is a big difference is with the attributes. Okay, so we roll these after we've picked our career, but we can at least look at them now. So this is the base table out of the core book, and obviously the gnomes and ogres have their own table that's kind of different. Yeah, so as you can see, the humans, you just roll 2d10 across the way and you add 20 to it. So you're going to get values between 22 and 40 with a nice normal curve. So majority of them are going to be in the middle of it. Now, there are some options to generate those, but right now, focus on those bonuses. So here we have 10 attributes and humans get 20 to each. So the rolls are always 2d10 across all the characters and all the races, but it's a bonus. So you can see weapon skill in that top row, it's 20 for humans, 30 for dwarves, 10 for halflings, 30 for elves. So there are differences. If we were to total all of those up, the humans obviously is going to be 20 by 10, so it's 200. Ogres come in at the lowest at 165. Halflings are 220, dwarves and gnomes 230, and elves get a whopping 280. Now, obviously, where those numbers go does make a difference. So while ogres are coming out poorest, they have plus 35 to their strength and toughness. So that really pigeonhole them into being a elite fighter, but they are going to be exceptionally good at it. So, if you're going to be playing ogre, you're not expecting to play an ogre wizard necessarily, or a ogre intellectual, or charming face man. You're probably expecting to be a fighter. So there's going to be a lot of dump stats, and even though you're getting less overall. However, as part of that, you do have a massive number of points for the elves. So they are getting a significant bonus here. Now, the balancing factor in theory for this is the fate and resilience points. Humans start with 2 fate and 1 resilience, and then get another 3 points to split between them. Elves, in contrast, have 0 in each of those, and only 2 points split between them. So that's going to be a total of 6 for humans and 2 for elves. As we talked about in the last video, these are very important, as worst case scenario, burning a fate point will save your life. Now, broadly, as I understand it, the consensus is that the stats are better, and elves are quite powerful. For our humans, we all went with 4 fate and 2 resilience, as having a high fortune means we get lots of rerolls each session, and having fate and burn will keep our characters alive if things get scary. We'll get more into stats later, but for now, understand that not all species are equal. So make that roll, and if you don't get what you're looking for, you can just switch. You will lose out on some XP, but it's only going to be 20 XP. It's not much. Now, that said, there is a reason why rolls 1 to 90 are humans, and that's because this setting is heavily focused around humans. So while mechanically having a party of elves is going to be perhaps the optimal choice, these stories work a lot better with the elves and dwarfs used in small amounts. So my recommendation for this one is to roll the species up and, play what you get. If you obviously get something that you're not interested in, if you want to play a halfling or you don't want to play an elf or dwarf, then just default to human. You lose a little XP out of it, but whatever. I would not recommend a group of all elves going in. That the vibe, the feel of the story will just be very, very different. So yeah, in this case, although you do have the option, I would not recommend picking. Now, the next role is for your career. This is another D100 role, and it does differ slightly for each species. So yeah, there are a couple of ones here. Can we see an example? So you can see the dwarf can't be a nun. Only humans can be a nun, according to this table, which is fair enough. Again, if you like what you get, then you're going to get 50 XP out of it. So again, it's better than that 20 before, but it's really not much. It's half a set of the XP. If you don't like that, you can roll 2 more times, and instead you're going to get 25 XP instead of the 50. And if you don't like that, you can pick whatever you want. Now, along with species, I do think this is one of the bigger decisions to make. Each career is a combination of stats, skills, and talents that you can basically spend when you XP up. You start at the lowest rank, which is the first entry with that cross symbol. It's an iron cross, I think it is. In that block up top, you can see the characteristics that you'll be able to spend XP at each rank, with each rank adding more options. The symbols are a little confusing. Honestly, I think it might be better if they actually put numbers in it. But the first rank is the cross, so the iron cross. And then the second one is the 2 axes in bronze. The third rank is the skull with silver. And then the last rank in the career is the shield in gold. Now, at second rank, you can still buy all of those attributes or characteristics from the first rank, and so on, with the last rank opening up all of them. Skills are similar, so you can advance skills on your rank and lower ranks. Talents, however, are different. If you advance in rank, you unlock new talents, but the previous talents are no longer available. So this can end up with some weird situations where you may actually want to drop ranks. So you might leave rank 4 and go back. So in this case, if I don't pick up read and write at first level and then I move on, the later witch hunter levels aren't going to have read and write. So I'm not going to be able to get it. And I could be witch hunter general and just not be able to read and write. That could be fine. That could be a thing you want to do. But at the same time, it might be something you want to go back and drop out of your high rank, go back into the low rank, and then move on from there. Wizard is also a good example of this, as the early levels have access to the etheric attunement talent, which in the last video we talked about is really good for channeling. But in your first rank, you typically don't have access to any spells that require channeling. So at best, you'll have access to petty magic, and petty magic has the casting number of 0. So the first rank is going to be the only place you're going to be able to get it, and it is one of those talents that you might want to get multiple times, but you're not going to use it until later. So one of the things that you can do is you can actually ignore it initially, go up the ranks, and then drop back down again and pick it up. Although the recommendation, I believe, for a wizard is try pick it up 2 or 3 times before you leave the first rank. For character generation, you are going to be focused on those initial skills for your career rank 1. They will really define a character in your first 2 sessions. Eventually, though, you will advance and move up the ranks or into another career, so it might be worthwhile considering what your character will eventually look like. Unlike with earlier editions, you're not locked into the selection from your career. When your character has some downtime between stories, they can perform endeavors. Basically, it's the humdrum stuff you would do when not adventuring. The training endeavor can be used to learn skills and characteristics outside of your career by paying a trainer and spending normal XP. The unusual learning endeavor is similar, but it lets you train a talent outside of your career. Although to do so, you need to succeed at a hard test using relevant skill. But this does mean that gone are the days where you would literally just join a career to pick up a certain talent or skill and then leave. That said, to finish your career rank, you do need to hit a specific set of objectives. So for rank 1, or for all ranks, you need at least 1 talent from your career rank. To finish rank 1, you must have at least 5 advances in 8 of the skills from your starting career and 5 advances in each of the 3 characteristics at rank 1. So for the Spiritor, that's going to be Dex, Int, and Willpower. We're going to need to get 5 in those. We're going to need to get 1 of the talents, so that's the Etheric Attunement, Petty Magic, Read Writer, Second Sight, and we're going to need to get 8 of those skills up to 5. Now, this particular list does have 10, and that's because in some of the more recent careers, they've added a few more options. You need to get 5 in 8, not the full 10. Yeah, so if basically it gives you a few more options. If you're not particularly interested in some skills, you'll have to take them. If you look at the character generation, you will get 1 talent, you will get 40 skill points advances, and 5 characteristic advances. So if you spent your skills spreading across all 8 skills, then you're only going to be missing 10 characteristic advances. So you're basically 250 XP off finishing out your career, which is something that you're going to be able to do in a few sessions. Once you have finished it, you are going to need to spend another 100 to move up in the ranks. So it's going to be basically a total of 350. But, it's like a month's worth of play, like 4 sessions. Not too bad. So you could push into the next rank if that's something you wanted. However, this is not D&D. Moving up ranks isn't going to automatically make you better at everything. All it does is open up a few more skills, a few more talents to spend XP on, but then you're going to be locked out of the talents from the previous level. So maybe we shouldn't rush into this. And the other approach is to try maximize your XP spend. And this is a classic thing that you see in a lot of role-playing games. During character generation, if the system of assigning your stats differs from the XP one, often you're best off maximizing what you're getting in XP worth. Okay, yeah, so as we talked about earlier, when you're looking at the species skills, you're going to be able to get 3 of them to 5. When it comes to your career skills, you can put up to 10 points in a skill. On the bottom of page 36, we have an important point. That 10-point limitation only applies to disallocation of 40. So if you already have 5 advances in a skill from your species, then that can go up to 15 points. Even without that, putting 10 in a skill is going to save you a lot of XP in the long term. Paying from 0 to 5 costs 50, but from 5 to 10 costs 75. And 10 to 15 costs 100. So if you are able to get something up to 15, you're basically saving a lot, because you're going to be then spending your XP to move some of your other skills from 0 to 5, which are going to cost you a lot less. So while spreading these advances evenly will help you finish up a career faster, personally, I believe maximizing the skills is beneficial in the long term. So for me, I ended up with plus 15 in my charm skill, as that was on the human species list for the Reichslander, and I then put 10 in Intimidate, and I put 10 in Perception and 10 in Heal. So I had a 15, a 10, a 10, and a 10 in my career. So I have a lot of skills to get through to get onto the next rank, but at the same time, I feel like I'm saving a lot of XP on it. And then I was able to spend some bonus XP on the career skills that I had skipped. So in this case, I had 45 XP left over, and I put 4 advances into melee brawling. And then I spent a little bit of silver on picking up some knuckle dusters to be a little bit dirty in a fight. This is probably a good time to talk about some of the skills to keep an eye out for. The first to note is the skill in your career list that's in italics. This is the skill you roll whenever you're trying to earn money with your career. So for me, as a witch hunter, that was Intimidate. Leaving aside the earning money aspect, this is likely to be the skill your character will be using a lot, as it's central to the career team. The second thing to look out for is any advanced skills. These are the ones that don't appear by default on the character sheet. So that's that section on the right. These are the skills that you cannot use if you do not have advances in that skill. In my case, the heal skill is in the advanced list, so I wanted to have at least 1 point in that just so I could open up access to it. I actually ended up putting 10, as I figured the party would need some healing access, and having more would mean I'm less likely to roll badly and actually injure my party members. Now, if I didn't, though, it might be worth spending at least 10 of my bonus XP to get at least 1 advance, so I could at least roll the skill. And that's kind of the key point. With some of the advanced skills, you need to have at least 1 point in it just so you can roll the skill on it. And also, generally across all skills, you can't help somebody if you don't have at least one advance in it. So kind of keep that in mind. After all that, you are going to have to use your judgment on what kind of roles your GM will be looking for. Perception is probably a good one, as you'll often roll walking into a new situation to spot something interesting. Charm is a nice generic social skill, and intuition is something that you can ask to roll whenever you suspect someone might be lying or just being suspect. A lot of these obviously are combat skills, but yeah, it's going to kind of rely to a certain extent on the kind of style of your GM and how it's been played out. All right, so we've looked at our available skills. Now, this is actually step 4 of the character generation process and should happen after we've finished our attributes. I would suggest going back to revisit step 3 though and redo your characteristics, whether that's with the point buy or moving the numbers around. Since we know the skills that will be useful, making sure we have the characteristics to back them up will be helpful. Now, because basically each skill is linked to a specific characteristic, and that's what its base starting is before it gets the advances. Now, there is a minor quirk in doing this. What you can do is you can plan out your skill buy for step 4 and know all of that during step 3. There are a few random aspects to that, however, especially for humans who get 3 random talents, many of which can increase characteristics. Rolling for these talents happens after you've already finalized your characteristics. And for our game, we also use the astrology table from the Archives of the Empire, Volume 2, which has some additional bonuses and penalties depending on your in-game star sign, essentially. Going by the book, we should be working out all our characteristics first and then have the bonuses apply afterwards. Doing it in the other order does let you optimize those numbers a little bit better. Now, my own recommendation would be for a GM to ignore this. What you really want to do is you want to have a session 0 where everyone gets those random rolls out of the way, but you don't want to rush players into finalizing all the details of their skills and characteristics, because rushing it can end up in mistakes or people just not happy with what they have. I think giving them a week to make some minor tweaks and adjustments and kind of get a feel for how their character comes together is just going to end up in a better experience overall. Now, in my case, I got quite lucky with traits. I got the very strong and the marksman out of the randomly rolled ones, so that gives me +5 to my ballistic skill and +5 to my strength. I'd already planned on having my strength and ballistic skill quite high. Although I can't use them straight away, I'm looking forward to firing some pistols. So I don't think it would have had a big impact on how I put my numbers in, but maybe I would have put the 36 in the strength rather than 35 that I did. Realistically, though, it's going to be pretty minor, and the 5 advances that you do get for free at the end of the character generation process would round out any of those kind of potential differences. So anyway, that's something I want to mention. And yeah, my recommendation is to roll up everything you want to roll up and then let the players kind of go back and kind of tweak the decisions as they go about. Anyway, GMs know what they're doing. Let's talk a little bit about attributes. So by now you should have a list of skills that you know you want to be good at, and you'll know what the related attribute is. But there are obviously a couple of kind of base things that each of these characteristics or attributes are relevant for. So let's quickly run through them and see what's important. Weapon skill is basically used anytime you try to hit someone in melee. It's also used as one of the options when you're defending. It's arguably the most important combat stat, as more success levels will mean you're going to win more, and in the contested role, and more success levels also mean more damage. So it's kind of a twofer. It's a defensive and it's an offensive. If you only had this and a melee skill, you would be able to happily play this game and do quite well. Ballistic skill is quite similar, but obviously it's for range combat. It doesn't have defensive options, though. That said, shooting from range is generally a nice place. You're not going to be upset that you're not melee, but it does mean that if you have a high ballistic skill, you probably want to have a decent weapon skill to back it up in case you're being attacked in melee, or at least a decent dodge skill, which we'll talk about later. Strength is about lifting, swimming, and climbing. In combat, for most weapons, the strength bonus, so that's the tens number, is added to your damage. So this is one where you're looking to have it at 30 and not 29, if that makes sense. Toughness is the reverse of strength. It's in theory rolled for things like avoiding a cold after a rough night out in the rain, or probably more relevant to make sure you don't get drunk after downing a few pints. Importantly, though, it reduces the damage you take by whatever the toughness bonus is. So again, that's the 10s. So this, every time you get hit, this is a flat damage reduction. It is super, super good. And a high toughness will probably keep your character alive, where a low toughness would have them rolling on crit tables quite quickly. Initiative is used for skills like perception and intuition, so spotting things and knowing what other people are thinking. The initiative bonus is used to determine who acts first in a round. So is it the bonus, or is it the... I think actually it might be the flat number. So I think a 31 would beat a 30, if that makes sense. So your order may not necessarily matter too much within group, but obviously trying to get the drop on one of the bad guys and act before them is going to be advantageous. Agility is about running, riding, and hiding. Importantly, it is used for dodging in combat. If you're not a melee-focused character, then this might be a good defensive option. Notably, there are a few things that you do not want to try parry, like a rock slide. So dodge will come up even for characters who prefer to use your weapon skill. Intelligence is anything involved learning, so it's the key skill for spellcasting, but also healing and general knowledge skills. So yeah, a lot of those attributes that are the advanced skills will end up using intelligence. Willpower is about resisting outside influences, so it might not come up often, but it is key when you're trying to fight something terrifying. Then we have Fellowship, which is for social interactions, charming a guard, or gossiping with folk in the bar. I should also mention that Wounds is a derived stat, so it's your strength bonus plus your willpower bonus plus twice your toughness bonus. So on average, these are all going to be on the 30s, and the wounds will be 4 times that, so 12. Do remember, for any of the derived stats, if your base stat does increase, so if your toughness moves from 39 to 40, then that is going to up your wounds by the relevant value. In this case, it's going to be 2. The last thing I want to talk about is careers. For some games, you want to pick a specific combination of classes. The classic obviously being the tank, healer, and damage setup. This isn't really the case for Warhammer. In theory, you should be able to play any combination of characters, and it's up to your GM to work the game around you. It's really more of a kind of a simulation than a gamified version, if that makes sense, than a computer game, if that makes sense. That said, as with many RPG games, combat is usually a major focus, so you definitely should have a few fighters amongst the group. Now, that's not particularly hard to do, as the average human can start off with plus 5% in a melee basic, and most careers will come with some sort of hand weapon. A career with a weapon skill or ballistic skill as a rank 1 attribute is going to be able to increase those numbers quickly, but initially everyone should be able to hold a knife and get stuck in if required. We probably should have some healing in the group. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a cleric, although that can be an option. Instead, it will be beneficial to have someone with a heal skill, which will help speed things up. So the nun is a good example of that, and there's an apothecary in there as well. So these are more proper, like real-life healers rather than the magical ones. It is possible to survive without the heal skill or a heal spell of some sort. It does mean you're stuck rolling endurance every night at plus 20 to try recover wounds equal to your toughness bonus and your success levels. So you make the roll, check how many success levels you have, and then add your toughness bonus onto that. And then you're regaining that number of wounds. For critical wounds, so those are the ones where you have to roll a crit table, things can get more serious. And you can have situations where, like, a broken bone healing badly could result in a permanent characteristic penalty. So having someone around with a little bit of healing can help avoid that. If you can't get any of that for some reason, just make sure you've got some bandages, as that does count as medical assistance at a pinch. And try and make sure that you check in with the Temple of Shalia or whatever doctor or barber you can find in the local town that you're visiting. It would also be a good idea to have someone, maybe 2, good at social interaction. As I mentioned in the background video, WFRP is more of a fantasy Call of Cthulhu than it is necessarily a D&D. It'll depend to a certain extent on whatever campaign you're playing through and how your GM wants to do things, but chances are having 1 or 2 in the group who can hold a conversation will be a good idea. Similarly, you probably should have someone in the group who can read and write. So, you can actually check out those wanted notices and whatever other handout the GM wants to give you. don't worry too much if you've got none of that. Now, maybe you've somehow managed to roll a group of all artists. And I should note, it took me a while to settle on artist career as an example, because almost every career has the ability to fight, socialize, heal, and or read write, and probably a combination of them. If you do have a group of artists or similar, they'll still have some good skills like perception, gossip, and stealth that should get you through the first 2 sessions. You'll probably end up leaning on those rolled attributes and the species skills, but it's going to be fine. You'll eventually progress and pick up some skills as you need them. As I mentioned before, you can take downtime actions to pick up skills outside of your class, and there is also the option to drop out of art college for 200 XP. So basically, if you don't want to finish your rank 1 career, you can drop out and instead pick something else. Artists are courtiers, so you can move into any other courtier career at rank 1 if you spend 100. So that's sorry. So yeah, any other courtier for 200, and then if you wanted a non-courtier career, you can spend another 100 for a total of 300 XP. But remember, it's only 3 sessions, and that will start you into any class that you and your or any career that you and your GM think would make sense in the story. So you still have options, and honestly, that's not the artist career, which really looks like it's a fantastic one because it's at ease in a criminal gang in the back streets of Aldorf as it is at entertaining nobles in the Imperious Palace. So if you do have someone who's rolled up an artist, or if you're someone who's rolled up an artist, enjoy it. It is actually a really, really enjoyable, fun class to play. It's just an example where I'm trying to say where you've got all 5 artists, and that story is going to be fantastic. If you're all starting in art college and then you're ending up years down the line as heroes of the empire, that's one hell of a story. Yeah, so that's all I have. Largely, it is just kind of to give the brief overview, to talk about how the XP options and switching around are there. Work out what skills are in your career, what skills are going to be relevant, max them out, in my opinion, as best you can. You don't end up min-maxing the character per se. It just makes your XP spends in the end a little bit more efficient. So basically, in a month's time of play, if you've done that where you're trying to max out some of your skills as early as possible, you are in a month's time just going to have a few extra points beyond where you would be otherwise. But yeah, get out there, roll up a character, and see what you get. There's a reason I'm back playing the Enemy Within campaign decades after my first playthrough. The Warhammer setting is really, really unique. And for those of us who've kind of grown up with it, it has a kind of, it feels a bit like home. It's very comforting setting. The system that Cubicle 7 have got in their book for rolling up characters gives you a great variety, tons of options, and really makes every group unique. There's like a lot of story already told. So, because you're not just rolling up a generic fighter or ranger, there's so much more character because it feels like you're part of the world. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you for going through this with me. If you've got any tips, don't forget I am playing, and I do want to hear from them. And as always, if I've made any mistakes, please put a comment below so anyone else who's listening to this video won't be misled by my rambling and instead will have the best possible information that you can provide them. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great week, and next week I'll get back to looking at some of GW skirmish games. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible 2-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.